I have never pulled a light-skinned girl's ponytail in my life. And in fact, I've never seen any dark-skinned person do it either. And I wonder if this is just like some, I don't know, what do you call those things where people like urban legends? Like, used to pull my ponytail. They used to cut my hair in class. Like, I've never seen anything like that in my whole entire life. And I don't even remember hearing about someone who's had that done to them. Only like in other spaces, like other towns, social media. Like, I've never seen this ever. And so I don't know. Okay, this is not going to be a documentary. This is not going to be a documentary. I want to talk about my experience with light-skinned women because I've had so many light-skinned women as close friends. I'm talking about kicking it every single day. I've had mixed race friends close, and so many things that I have read about, have heard about. You know, my experience was entirely different. And this whole conversation got sparked. I did that video, you know, how I dodged colorism as a dark-skinned woman. And I want to explore more of that because a lot of you had a lot of really interesting things to say. I mean, you cracked open a lot of my brain that was just turned off to that. And I mean, I think it's worth talking about. I really do, particularly because of my upbringing. Whew. I rediscovered my high school yearbook the other day, and it triggered a lot of different things. So I don't know if some of these were suppressed memories or if I have no idea. But I'm going to talk about all of that in a minute. No Makeup Needed is a beauty and lifestyle channel where I give you tips and tricks on how to be your most fabulous self, hopefully inspiring you to embrace your natural beauty without filters, fillers, Photoshop, and of course, makeup. I grew up in a very like traditional, you know, middle class suburban area, and there are 3 homes in my life because I haven't lived in the same home my whole entire life. So there's 3 specific homes that kind of really stick out to me. You know, up until like 4th grade, I was in a particular house, and then there was like a year move, and then there was another house. So there are 3 specific homes, and they all have their triggering points. Okay. So when I was young, I grew up in, you know, my parents got married like 22 years old or something like that. Regular black folks, right? Well, sort of. Anyway, black parents, both black parents. My father was a military guy. He was very pro-black, you know, I mean, very. Like, when I tell you I got sick of hearing about everything turning into a Black history lesson, I'm not exaggerating. I wish I was exaggerating. I wish I was exaggerating when I say that no matter what I brought up, it could be about taking out the trash, that turned into some history about something in any country, because he was well-traveled. So we're talking about the whole African diaspora. We're not just talking about American history. We're talking about Brazil. We're talking about different parts of Africa. We're talking all the places he'd been, okay? And so we're talking like over 35 countries worth of this. And I didn't appreciate it then because it was just too much. It was just too much. But that had a big influence on how I felt about myself as a little girl, being dark. And I know you guys have your opinions. These comment streets were lit after that video, and other people were talking about me in their videos, you know, arguing whether I got all sorts of snacks and pastries to name your complexion by: pecan pie, cinnamon raisin, caramel, chocolate, all sorts of stuff. So people were talking about whether I was caramel, whether I was dark-skinned. I'm dark-skinned. That's what I have always said about myself. I'm not going to change it now. I know there's different shades of brown. I'm not even caring about that. So my family, there's no extreme light skinned person. Like some of you guys, you have different complexions within your family. Maybe your mom is like super, super fair and your father is like deep, deep dark. My father's dark. My mother's still considered dark. She's about the complexion of, I would say, Sanaa Lathan, who is, I don't know. She's probably like a shade and a half lighter than I am, like without the summer tan, like her true, like, when you take off your bra and look at your boobs, that's your real complexion. Okay, if you haven't been to the beach, during the winter, just take off your bra and that's what it is. So that complexion is probably like somewhere around that. It's like a little bit fairer than me, but still dark. So all my siblings are dark. All my cousins are dark. I don't have anybody who stands out like, oh, you're the light sibling, I'm the dark. We ain't got none of that in my family. Complexion was never talked about. Hair texture was never talked about. Never. Do you hear me? Nobody, looks were never talked about. It wasn't like, oh, you're so pretty, pretty, pretty. None of that. My mother never wore makeup, not even on her wedding day. We didn't even have the time to be talking about that. There were 8 people in the house. I'm one of 6 children. Are you kidding me? And there was so much emotional upheaval going on. I don't even think I would have had the heart space to even deal with whatever was going on in my house and then go outside talking about somebody making fun of my hair and I don't even know, honey, how y'all function like that. So a lot of you had some deep rooted stories. I mean, deep, deep, deep stories, which for me is so inconceivable because no one in my house talked about my complexion and no one outside talked about it either. And mind you, I did grow up for the most part in predominantly white neighborhoods. I would say at one point we were the only blacks. It was white as snow. But we were around blacks. Like there were blacks living across the street, blacks living next door. You know what I'm saying? So I would say the town was predominantly white, but in my vicinity, there were other blacks. Okay. And so I never caught that essence of, well, I'm too dark, or I look this way, I look that way, because the basis for how I was raised was always in kind of this African, you're black, and that's what it is. Now, mind you, my father was never like saying, it was kind of like a middle ground. So my mother would say nothing, basically nothing. But I just kind of like shadowed her. I watched her. Like she never wore makeup. She was always like put together, but never anything extra. So it was all just like, that's good enough. And then my father, who always dressed really nice, suit and tie every single day, he just made sure that our language, we wasn't picking up any language from outside. Like that, whatever other kids were talking about never came in the house. It was never like, oh, I want, my hair straightened until 4th grade when we got that Jerry curl. So in the house, there was none of that, right? But then, of course, as a kid, you start getting influence from outside. So going outside, I never really heard anything about the skin complexion. It was more about the texture of your hair. And so some of that must have seeped in, honey, because in 4th grade, I did get a Jerry curl. And everybody had a Jerry curl, in the early 80s and things like that. And so I got one. I do remember my father saying, no, 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 no. But I guess he finally bended and he never let me forget about that till the day he died. Remember, you made me get you that damn Jerry curl? And so something with that. But I would hear people talk about loose hair and things like this. And it mostly did come from fair-skinned girls. I don't have a memory, and I'm gonna kind of pop in and out of memories because that's how my brain works. I don't have a definitive avenue of saying this happened in 4th grade, this happened in 5th grade, this happened in 6th grade. When it comes to colorism or anything that attacks my features, I don't have that structure in that way. So I believe one of my earliest memories of anything that had to do with fair skin was a girl that I met. We actually knew her family before that, but I met her somewhere around 2nd grade. Very fair skin, very loose curl hair, not tight curls. I don't know if it's like 3B or whatever. I don't know this. I don't know the exactly how to label the hair texture. I know mine is 4C for a fact, but I don't know the others. So very loose kind of curl, okay? Fair skinned, not as fair as Meghan Markle. She wasn't a mulatto. Full black mother, mixed race father. She came out fair skinned, her and her siblings. Loose hair all the way down to her butt, and I do remember everybody praising her hair. So everything was about the hair. You got good hair. Ooh, you so pretty. You so, like, they showered her. Like, I was in shock because I had never heard that. No one had ever said that to me my whole life, you know, and it's probably a good thing. But she, honey, at our age, I dreaded going to her house. And I was like forced to play with her because my older sister used to take me, when she babysat me, she used to take me over there because she was the same age as one of her relatives. So she'd be like, let's go. I'm like, please. I remember begging on my knees. And this girl just happened to be mean. Like, she was not, she never in her, well, we're going to get to that. She never said like, oh my gosh, you're unattractive. Why your lips look like that? Or why is your hair like that or whatever. She was just not a kind person. She was sassy. She was up in your face, you know, and she did this thing where she would mush you in the face. And this is somebody that I've spoken about in my books. I've written 6 books, and 5 out of 6 have different stories of my childhood, and she pops up. And when I looked, it was interesting because she got overpraised for her looks, like overly praised, but we're going to talk about this in a minute. I want to bring something up about that. She got overly praised by, like, you know, grown women or like other kids in the neighborhood. Oh, she got that good hair. Or she's so pretty. And I don't really know whether the pretty was linked to the hair. I think that's what it was. It was just a direct link, because nobody ever talked about her features, darling. When I think of pretty, I'm looking at your features. I'm looking at your eyes. I'm looking at your face structure. I'm looking at the way your figure is built. Like, I do the whole thing. I'm not just like, oh, your hair is pretty and that makes you pretty. I know how to separate even as a child. So I never really got that about her. I never personally thought she was that pretty, to be honest, but I never said anything and no one ever did. It was like this kind of quiet thing. But I remember everything was about the hair, right? And she would do this thing where she would like mush you in the head. Like, she was very disrespectful, okay? She was very disrespectful. And so in my books, you know, I talk about that experience. And looking back in my yearbook, which I just pulled out, and it had so many triggering moments, because I didn't have that great of a my teenage years and my childhood and things like that. I had a lot of problems in my family and stuff like that. So it brought up so many like emotions, but I was like, hold up, let me go back and look at the picture of this person everybody was praising. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. If I showed you the photograph, you'd be like, what the fuck? You know what I'm saying? But like, our brains are so different back then. Like, when you're in an experience is different, but being so far removed, being 48 years old, going back to, you know, 7 years old, I'm looking at this picture like, honey, you ain't really doing fabulous like that. You know what I'm saying? Like, you really, like, truly not, you know. And I'm not saying that out of any animosity, because we were children, and I understand that her attitude was a root of her environment. We had 2 different environments growing up. My environment, nobody talked about looks. Her environment, that's all they talked about. Everything was praised. Everything was good hair. Everything was this, that. Mine was talking about the Africans, honey. Listening to, you know, all this other stuff. Malcolm X, honey, Elijah Muhammad. That's all I heard growing up. And hers was a different experience. So what she brought out into the world was all she knew. What I brought was all I knew, right? And so in my life, I've had many very fair-skinned friends. Now, I'm going to separate this. Where I grew up, I had different types of fair skin. So there were mulattoes, right? And some of them were raised with their black families. So they just integrated with black. They were not trying to call themselves mixed race. You never heard it. You never heard them talk about the white side. They didn't even mention them. Everything was black. They were incorporated into the black culture. And those in particular were the ones who had black mothers. Now you had the other mulattoes who had white mothers, and they were just incorporated into the white culture. The moms kind of kept them away from the blacks. They kind of pushed them towards dating white and this, that, and the other. I was friends with them too. I knew the difference, clear difference of hanging out at their house or hanging out at their house. Then we had the adopted by the white people individuals. So I hung out with them too. The black boys who was adopted by white individuals, okay? And the white parents had their whole separation too, like kept them kind of over there, like you're black, but not that kind of black, you know what I'm saying? So when you start talking about my complexion and being around them, there was not any conversation about their skin tone. There was no conversation about me in my vicinity about my skin tone either. Nobody made fun of it and was like, oh, you're too dark or you're this, that, and the other. But I did notice this. And I'm just going to pull out some memories here. So the very fair-skinned men, boys at the time, were very attracted to me. I guess maybe it was that contrast, or maybe it was that forbidden fruit of like, oh, my mom keeps telling me not to go over there. She keeps pushing me towards Jane. Let me go to Malika, you know? And many of them, whether they were mixed race, whether they were mulatto, whether they were Latino, whether they were South Asian, they were all like all of a sudden interested in me, in trying to get a date, trying to get me to call them, always hanging around me, blah, 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 blah. And I don't remember any sort of thing about my skin tone, but I do remember the mulatto boys who had the white mothers didn't really want me getting too close. They didn't want them that close with me like that. They would always push them towards, and actually they all ended up dating white women, and the mulattoes the women who had the white mothers ended up dating white men. So it worked. Basically, their plan worked. But I did notice that, and I don't know whether that had to do with my complexion. Would it have been different if I was a fair-skinned black girl as opposed to a dark-skinned black girl? I don't know, right? So my friends were pretty smart. Like, they came from educated parents. Some of their parents were professors or, you know, people who were raised in upper middle class, whatever, you know, they had access to education, so forth. So my friends, we never really had that conversation. Actually, we never had the conversation. Honestly, we didn't have that conversation. And they were pretty intelligent people. They weren't sitting around talking about dark skin, light skin, and things like that towards me, around me. In fact, their parents were like, oh, Malika's beautiful. My photo was in their living rooms and things like that. You know what I'm saying? And so I didn't hear it from my friends. Now, let's go back to that girl who was very unkind. I remember we became friends when we got older. I always wondered what the hype was about her. I was like, okay, you have half straight hair, it's down to your butt, you're very fair skinned. I'm trying to figure out, like, what are the benefits of that besides everybody saying you're cute, you're cute, you're cute. So I noticed, like, as we got older and we started going to school, like, no boys was really checking for her like that. And I was thinking, like, well, how, like, okay. And I noticed that the other races, like the popular girls or the girls who were deemed pretty, like, all the boys were trying to get them. And I'm like, okay, so in the black space, you're fair skinned, you got the straight hair, but no boys really checking for you. Like, I didn't know I can't name one person to this day who had a crush on her. She always dated people from like really dangerous neighborhoods who were like incarcerated and things like that. Maybe in that space she was much more elevated than, like, I didn't notice the black boys who came from really prominent families trying to check for her or nothing like that. Maybe she felt more comfortable with the ones who grew up kind of in the slums or in impoverished neighborhoods or very dangerous neighborhoods. She was always around those types of men. And even then, like, when we became friends, right? And I kind of infiltrated because I was like, I wonder what this chick is about for real. Like, forget being on outer skirts and like, oh, you know, this, that, and the other with my hair. So we started hanging out. We became friends, right? And I noticed that she was the one, first of all, she had a lot of problems, but anybody can have, it's not because she's light skinned that she had a bunch of problems. I'm just saying she had a bunch of problems, honey. And she was the one chasing the boys. She was the one putting in all the work. So it wasn't what we perceived. It wasn't what the people perceived. And she just had, like, I don't know, the attitude, a little bit of superiority. I guess it came with her upbringing. It came with people telling her, listen, you are light skinned. You have half straight hair. You can get whatever you want. You can get whatever man you want. You ain't got to get a perm. I heard that. You know, you lucky you ain't got to perm your hair, blah, 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 blah. And so when it came down to it, I really didn't see where she was accessing anything great from the things that from the you know, being fair skinned with the straight hair. So for me, I was never feeling jealous or like weird about it, because I'm like, well, what are you getting? You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm always like, okay, well, what are the benefits, right? And so she had to chase the boys. The boys she was getting was like really terrible, like the bottom of the barrel. Nobody who was from high society was trying to check for her, you know what I'm saying? And I really just didn't understand it. Like, she was kind of really getting abused, actually. There was a lot of abuse there. And I remember, you know, my other friends who were very fair, just as fair as her, different curl pattern hair, whatever, quote unquote, good hair. You know, there was this underlining joke with other people. And I remember somebody saying, like, would she be pretty if she had what they call a nappy? I don't use that term, but they was like, would she be pretty if she had nappy hair? And it was like an ongoing joke of like, imagine her with nappy hair. So that was kind of saying that she actually wasn't physically beautiful. She just had this quote unquote good hair, you know? And I was like, oh, that's really interesting way to think about it. Like, I hadn't thought about it. And so she and the others were never nasty to me. I've never been dogged out about my complexion. I never had anybody call, you know, my features out of, like, I never had that. In fact, the other light-skinned girls that I hung out with were very nice, and they even didn't like her ass because everything was kind of hush-hush, that like she was a bitch, really. She was like not kind. And so I was thinking, like, when a lot of people are like, oh, you know, light-skinned women think they're better, or this, that, and the other. I'm thinking I had so many fair-skinned friends, you know, of every culture or mixed culture, who they didn't even like her. You know what I'm saying? Like, so everybody was in, you know, this consensus of like, she was not a kind person. So like, if she was just being unkind, if it was just like, oh, she's light-skinned and she's a bitch, or she's a bitch because she's light-skinned, I probably would have had the experience with the other girls, but the others were really kind. Like, we did everything. We went to the beach, we went to eat, like we did all this stuff, and complexion was never mentioned unless they mentioned it. I noticed that light-skinned girls mention their complexion more. Oh, I got to go to the beach. We're going to go to the beach. And where I'm from, the beach is their culture. So we lived at the beach, basically. Beach bums. But they would say, oh, I got to get my tan on, or like, they mentioned the complexion all the time. And even there were a couple of others who would at lunchtime would talk about, oh, let's see who's lighter. Oh, I'm real high yellow and blah, blah, blah. That was like a word then. And so the conversation was never amongst any like dark-skinned people, you know what I'm saying? And particularly not to me, because I was attractive to like the boys, you know what I mean? Now, here's the thing. Somebody mentioned in the comments of one of my videos that the light-skinned girls get upset when they notice you're not jealous, okay? So interesting enough, me and this girl, the mean one, who we became friends, so she kind of got rid of that mean shit in high school. We actually became good friends, and she hung out with me and she saw how I was living. Like, I was the virgin and she was super promiscuous, and she was like embarrassed about that because we got to know each other. Like, we didn't even know each other like that, right? But when she got to know me, she was like, oh shit. You know what I'm saying? Like, I was pretty eccentric, but I wasn't out there like that. I wasn't out having sex with a bunch of boys. Definitely no boys in motherfucking jail, honey. And I was like more introverted. Me and my other friends would just kick it like at the beach and, you know, go to clubs or, you know, drink on the corner, you know, drink our cute little things, or, you know, St. Ives or whatever on the corner. But she was really out there. So she kind of toned herself down around me. And then I kind of saw the ins and outs of like, oh, you don't really have any privilege. Like, you chasing dudes. You're the one getting pregnant. You're the one, you're getting the scraps. So I didn't really see where what she had was a privilege. I didn't see where the hair was working out for her. She wasn't a model. She wasn't making money off her looks. And, you know, when I look back at that high school yearbook, it actually isn't like that pretty. You know what I'm saying? She's just light skin with half straight hair. Like, there's so many people at the school who look way better. In fact, there was a guy who was like, and nobody ever talked about it. This was like hush hush. I don't know why. They were like scared of her, I guess. There was a guy who was like, oh, the best looking girls in the school are, and then they mentioned me, and then they mentioned somebody else who wasn't her. And I was like, I mean, I wasn't shocked, but it was the first time that we actually heard somebody like vocalize that she's really not pretty. Now, let's not pretend that there weren't other fair-skinned girls who were very pretty. There are pretty girls of all races where I grew up. You know, I did grow up with a lot of, like I said, I hung out with a lot of fair-skinned individuals, and I never got clowned. So my experience is like, if you're just the asshole, it's because you're just fucking asshole, period. And nobody ever, now this is the thing. This was only in the black community, unfortunately. So in high school, a family came to our town, and they were straight out of Nigeria. 100% Nigerian. They didn't even speak that much English. They had, you know, the accent and everything. They were dark skinned, darker than I am. And I want to say who it is because they're like rich now and on TV, like, but I can't. I don't want to do it. Anyway, when I tell you the black people, including that girl, clowned them for filth. And I think that's the one time that I ever witnessed something like that. And me and one of my friends who was very fair-skinned, one of my closest friends was like, what the fuck is going on? You know what I'm saying? Like, what's up with that? And they were making fun of their accent, called them African blue scratcher, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, wow, it was so horrible, actually. One of you guys said under one of my videos that your experience with colorism was so grave that if you didn't have jealousy for a light-skinned person, they got triggered by that. Now, I have to agree with that, and I'll tell you how. So a couple of scenarios pop up in my mind, and as I think back on them, I'm like, oh, is that what it's about? And I think this can apply to anyone who was raised in an environment where they were taught that they were better than you because of whatever, because of your social economic status, because of your complexion, because of your features, because of where you grew up, whatever. I think this applies as well. So one thing that sticks out, and I said this in my other video, is when I was 19 and, you know, working in the computer lab and everything, and this light-skinned black guy came in, and he was kind of like, yay, I got so many girls. And he did have a lot of girls. There were 3 girls like hanging on him, and they weren't dark-skinned girls, by the way. You know, they were into him. I could tell he get a lot of attention. And so I wasn't giving him any attention, and that triggered him. He was like, oh, you know, you want to come over here and come on over here, like sit on my lap. Cause he was in one of those chairs that had wheels on it, and he was kind of wheeling around, and there were like 3 girls hugging on him. And I was like, no, I'm good. I'm straight. Like, no, thank you. And that triggered him. It was like, oh, you pretending you don't like me? Everybody likes me. Everybody, you know, and I don't know that behavior was directed towards me because I'm dark skinned, and it's like, oh, you're dark skinned, of course you want me. Like, of course, I'm light, like, of course. I've also had that happen to me when I was young and like babysitting for this couple, and the woman, you know, she noticed that I would go outside, like I had my natural hair and everything, going out in the sun and everything, and she was like, "Oh, you're getting blacker and blacker," or something like that. Yeah, she said she didn't say you're getting blacker and blacker. She was like, I think I was like, "Oh, let me go out and enjoy the sun." She was like, "Getting blacker and blacker," and I was like, "Yup." And she was the type, it was interesting because she thought that, I think she was saying that towards me, like, as in she's so comfortable of like, maybe being around other blacks who are like, "Oh, I don't want to get any darker." And I was, honey, like I said, I was a beach bum. So I was like, yep, like it wasn't a problem for me. Okay. So she was the type who would tan all the time. And back then, tanning wasn't like, I don't know how tanning is now, actually. I'm saying it like I've experienced. But I know you go into the stall and they spray you. So it wasn't like that back then. Back then you had to like put it all on your hands and stuff and like wait and like stand there naked and let it dry. So she would do that all the time. She would have tanning lotion all staining her sheets and everything. And I remember on the way out of the house, I was like, "Good luck with your tan." And that, we left it like that. Let me see, another experience I had was with, when I lived in Puerto Rico, this very fair-skinned girl. She was black. Her father was half black, so she had a white grandmother. Fair skin, half straight hair. She was one of those people who said like ignorant things, and I caught her saying something. So we went out to a club and we got back, like we was trying to get back like 4 o'clock in the morning. And we took a break and sat on this bench, and she was saying something about how she didn't shave her legs, and I didn't care. I was like, "Okay," and she was like, "That's okay, because please, I got good hair." And she rubbed her leg and was like, "I got good hair." Honey, I paid her no mind. And I think that triggered her, that I didn't care about her hair. In fact, she was all over me because she wanted to model and she thought I was going to hook her up with an agency. And she was from a different state. We met there when I was living there. And she kept following me around for years. Like, we had become friends, and she was kind of like, I think that's the only reason why she was a friend of mine. But, you know, I remember that, sitting on that bench, that park bench, on the way home from a club at like 4 a.m. And she's like, "I got good hair." Another thing came up too, when I went to visit her in her state, and this was a couple of years later. We went into a beauty salon store because she had become a hairstylist, and she was like getting her discounts and all her stuff. And the cashier was like, "Ooh, your hair is so pretty. I know you happy you ain't got to worry about getting them perms, girl." And she just sat there. She didn't say anything because she knew I wasn't the type who was going to be like, yeah, you know, like feed into that bullshit. So she just kind of smiled and accepted the compliment or whatever. But I know she was the type behind the scenes to like feed into that. So she was one of those, you know what I'm saying? But when it came down to it, like, yes, there is some triggering when I don't accept what you like. I'm not chasing you. I'm not chasing you. I'm not checking for you. I'm not playing in your hair. You know what I'm saying? And as far as that, being attacked or any type of conversation towards color, it was usually within the black community. I did see speckles, like I said, of white people mentioning something. You know, when I was a babysitter in college, one of the little girls was like, "Oh, wow, how did you get your skin this dark?" and things like that. You know what I'm saying? Because they had never really seen any black people. So that was coming from a different perspective. But I've never been like attacked for it. Like, people have always been like, "Oh, you have beautiful skin. It's so clear. It's so amazing." And even that girl too, she, the one who said she got the good hair, her leg hair, it was so good. She even was like, "Oh my gosh," you know, when I'm out with my friends, they like, "Who that? The girl with the nice skin?" Like, and that was something that she kind of envied because she had very bad skin and she always had to wear very heavy cover up, whatever the heaviest is, the concealer to cover it up. And since I wasn't the one that was like praising her or touching her hair, actually I ain't touching nobody's hair, honey. I think it's so unsanitary. I'm not one of the people, "Ooh, let me feel your locks." And no, we're not doing that. But I think I was the first dark-skinned person to kind of alter her thinking with that, because she got better over the years with it. She was like all of a sudden saying something was ignorant. I'm like, oh, when we met in the Caribbean, darling, you wasn't talking like that, but bravo. So my experience with light-skinned people have been like, okay, what are you benefiting from it? Are you getting what you need? You know what I'm saying? Are you getting something that I'm supposed to be jealous of? I'm not jealous of any hair texture. I don't give a shit whether you're fair skin or not, because I've, gotten whatever you're trying to say that I'm jealous of. The boys, the whatever attention, any type of accolades didn't stop me. My skin color never stopped me from getting. And so I think about that, as a whole. And I know my experience is not like many of you guys who are very dark skinned and you grew up around individuals who maybe, and yeah, don't come for me in the comments, maybe who were not educated people who said ignorant shit like that, like the people who use the N-word, or the people who still say light skin with good hair. I remember, look at this. Ooh, the memories are popping up. I remember my brother's girlfriend at the time. I remember we were supposed to go out to a club, and she's fair skinned, but not like really, like she wouldn't consider herself fair skinned for whatever reason, but she's fair skinned, okay? And she and I were supposed to go out to a club one night, and something happened with her brother, and it was like real serious. She was like, I can't go out. Some stupid girl accused him of RAPE, and she was like, that bitch is lying. My brother get pretty ass light skinned girls with good hair. I was like, okay. And I just left it. I didn't even respond, because I already knew the ignorance of that commentary. So that tells you where her brain is. And she's fair skinned. So I don't know. Like, I'm trying to understand all this. Many of you guys grew up surrounded with people like that. Maybe they're your aunts, your mamas, your siblings, maybe your daddy even saying ignorant shit like that. It starts at the root and it begins to corrode you. So maybe you're in that vicinity of people who saying the N-word, yeah, blah, blah, blah. I get this, like women calling their man that, this in that. I'm about to get that from this in. Stupid shit like that. Or women who are talking that talk. Ooh, I'm gonna get this Puerto Rican man. Like when I grew up in the 80s, everybody had to be Puerto Rican. I'm like, no, like none of these people were from the island, by the way, who they were talking about. But all of a sudden they want this light-skinned PR. There was a guy who was trying to get with me, and the first thing he said was, I'm half Puerto Rican, half Cuban. And I was like, ew. Like, it was such a turn off. I was like, I don't know that he would have said that to a light-skinned woman. I mean, he said that to me maybe because he thought like, oh, I'm dark, I'm going to be running after you, honey, please. I never spoke to him again. I just completely ignored him. And I think that did chip at him a little bit. But like I said, any space where you think, or you were trained to believe that you are superior because of whatever reason, when it doesn't pan out, when somebody's not feeding that, of course it's going to be triggering. Now, are all light-skinned women that fucking ignorant and sitting around all day talking about this, that, and the other? Absolutely not. Like, my friends weren't. You know what I'm saying? If I did hear some of that, like I said, they doing that shit with each other, talking about who's yellow at the lunch table in high school. Like, what are you talking about? And everybody got their arm out talking about, oh, but that's not my real complexion. This is, and opening up the shirt so they can see the part that the sun hasn't hit yet. This is my real complexion and shit like that. Like, so that they're not really that dark and they really 3 shades lighter and stuff like that. Like, I never had that conversation with dark-skinned girls sitting around, and my fair-skinned friends parents were highly educated. You know what I'm saying? We never sat around talking about no bullshit like that. It was never said to me. I would say, in conclusion of this video, the most I've heard was about hair texture. Everybody had that, talking about their good hair, talking about their curly hair, talking about they don't need no perm, or they do need a perm, or you need to get a perm, and things like that. And I do remember a little bit of snorkeling, because I quit getting relaxers in 1992. And I think I've only had 4 in my life. One, well, with the Jerry curl, that's pretty much a relaxer. It's still chemicals. I remember a little bit of snarks, like not a whole lot, you know what I'm saying? But a tiny little speckles of that. Oh, wait a minute. Wait. Ooh, oh my gosh, how dare I end this video without giving you this example. Oh, wait, hold up. What grade was I in? 10th grade. There is a fair-skinned girl. There's a fair-skinned girl. And we get into some sort of disagreement. And she was like, that's why you black. And I was like, so are you. How naive was I? I wasn't even thinking like, oh, she talking about that's why you dark skinned. Because automatically I was like, so are you. And the conversation ended. Like she literally had no rebuttal. And I was like, we're both black. And she was like, well, what you'd expect me to say, I had to have some sort of comeback. And I'm thinking like, you literally have nothing to say. Once I was like, so are you, you are too. Like instantly, I'm thinking like, we're both fucking black. Like you're not like a white girl in my face talking about, that's why you black. Like it's a problem though. So it's so interesting that I think about it. Of course she was talking about my complexion. Like some of y'all are going to think I'm like making this up. My whole perspective was not in any colorism situation. And the fair-skinned girls that I hung around, if they did it, it was amongst themselves, separately. I heard little conversations. I'm like, oh, this is how y'all talk. Like when I fall back and they talk about hair and stuff, mostly it was about hair, guys. So in conclusion, for real, I believe it was more texturism. Now, are there light-skinned women who are all over social media talking about how fly they are, talking about how jealous people are of their features and this? They're in that ignorant fucking space. And when you look at it, most of them, and I'm going to say this confidently, most of them don't even have their picture in the fucking avatar. They got some other shit. So they probably lying them, or I don't trust nobody who don't show their picture. Come on camera, come on YouTube like I do and show your face. If you're not here to show your face and you're popping a bunch of shit behind the scenes, you're lying. But you have a lot of ignorant people in those spaces. Everybody's supposed to be jealous. They're supposed to be the prettiest. And they never say what they're getting though. It's like, show me what you're getting that everybody's supposed to be jealous of. You know what I'm saying? So yes, there are people like that. There are people like that. I just didn't fuck with them. Whew. All right, guys. Like, subscribe, share, and all that good stuff. Let me get out of here. Let me give you a kiss. Because I think you need it after this. You need a... you need something.